Hey guys, what's up? It's Robert Mason here. I'm going to do a quick tour of a track I did with Amber a couple years back called Isabella. This is the vocal that I used in my mix called the Always at Your Side mix. And yeah, I'll take you through how I kind of got to that final product. So, very first thing, we'll give it a listen. Just so you understand how I have it set up here, I literally just have the vocal. I've gotten rid of everything else because my computer was not loving the whole screen share and playing back a huge session. So, what we're going to focus on is essentially how I sort of shrink down a vocal job because I find that out of all instruments, if you're to look at it that way, they're one of the most complex. Obviously, the most complex waveform is the human voice, or one of them anyway. So, it's a hard thing to, especially because it's very human, it's a hard thing to take control of and be able to get it to sit in the mix, and you end up with a lot of stems if you're not careful and all these kind of things. So here's how I do it. Essentially, I would have gotten the dry stem or stems from Amber, and then when I went ahead and worked on them, very first thing I like to do is get out Melodyne and just essentially lock everything to the key and be sure that I've got it so that it's going to sit in the track, throughout so that there's no surprises. It just makes mixing and editing and whatnot far easier later on. Um, and this is a fairly standard procedure for most vocals is to run it through through Melodyne because, it's the technology we have nowadays. Most things, even the best vocalists and whatnot, are put through it. So once I've done that, and I believe I've already flattened it, yeah, I have. So usually how I work is if I do that step, I'll focus, as much as I can on just pitch, timing, and sort of getting it to sit right. And then I flatten it down. So by that I mean I'll typically freeze it or I'll render out the stem. Depends. I mean, either's the same, pretty much. And then I've got something I can kind of work with. This is the big thing for me. So then from there, you can see like within the vocal, there are a lot of sort of things. You've got peaks, and then you've got a couple things that aren't as loud and that sort of thing. So the next thing that I go ahead and do, sometimes I adjust that in the clip. If there's a loud section, I'll just cut it out and turn it down a little bit. But that can be tedious. You're doing that for a long time when that's the case. So try to work fast, work efficiently. So essentially, though, what I've got here is if we give it a quick listen, let's see. So I apologize if it's clicking a little bit. My computer's not happy with me. But essentially, you can hear just from that little snippet, I've done some harmonic treatments. So rather than just, run one straight vocal through a tune, I like to try and layer it and add a little bit of, nuance, make it sort of special. And so that's what I've done there. I used Melodyne to essentially do some pitching and move it around and get a nice harmony going. And then again, once I've got it sort of flattened down, I tend to play with these sort of things. So here's some like Vox bits, I call them. Um, they're just little bits and pieces that Anyway, sorry, the vocal is coming in. But you can hear that in there's all these little goodies that I've essentially edited together. So that is once I've flattened down the file, got it in tune, I go ahead and I play with effects and I just kind of pull out the cool parts. So the next thing, let's see, we'll talk because I want to keep this short. One of the things I use is the de-esser just to keep some of those S sounds out of the signal. They're still there, but that's not a big deal because the de-esser tends to catch most of them, and then I do the rest with EQ. And so that sort of leads me to the next thing. It's looking at EQ. It's very simple. I tend to just cut out the low because that will muddy up your mix. The more low-end stuff that you have, they tend to blend together and just get very blurry. So I typically keep that out of a vocal. I've got it here, what do I have it, about 120 to 250. That's pretty high, but usually around 200, something like that. And I'm not picky about it. I just know that I don't want a lot of thud in the vocal. And then the next thing is I've got the vocal rider on there just to sort of, again, catch some of those louder passages and keep them all sort of in the same ball game. And then finally here, I think I'm just doing a little chain with Neutron. Very simple. It's just like a simple voice chain, little EQ. I can pull out some problem frequencies, boost up the top. Compression's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole hell of a lot going on there. That's only a 1-to-1 ratio, as you can see. This one's probably a little more, just to keep it kind of glued together. And then an exciter, I put that on to give it a little shine, and it seems to do the job. And then overall, I put everything together. Like, I'll get all these bits and pieces working together. You see here that I've clearly flattened down all these because I believe they were kind of a mess. So once I got it to a place where I liked it, I just froze it and flattened it because I know I can always go back in and pick it apart. And then lastly, just a little bit of stuff to sort of move it into the mix and have it gel nicely. So you can see I've just trimmed out the low end. I'm kind of making up for a little bit of extra frequencies in the mid-range, and then I popped the top a little bit. Nothing crazy. Here, I believe I did go a little crazy just to keep certain. Yeah, that's a little extreme, but it was keeping things in where I needed them because they were kind of poking out as I was mixing the tune. So that just essentially sort of holds in different frequency ranges. And then finally, basic delay just to give it a little bit of life. Always a big fan of automating that. You can see I've got a little bit of stuff. And finally, by putting those all through that channel together, I get more of a glued effect, like a final effect at the end. And I find that in the mixing process, if you're mixing the tune, you want to be able to pull all the vocals out while you're doing the mix and then double check and whatnot. So that's just a really handy thing for me. I tend to group everything down when I'm getting to the finish line on a track. So that about wraps it up. Not much more to it than that. If you have any questions, please hit me up. Take it easy. Cheers.